Strengthening Airfield Lighting Safety with ICQs. Um, we're going to do a series of case studies this summer, uh, uh, presented by airports or interviewing airports about how they maintain and manage their airfield lighting in a safe and compliant manner. Now, this is a very exciting prospect, but as a precursor to that, um, I thought I would introduce the concept of an internal control questionnaire as a method to help support compliance, safety, and efficiency at airports. So it's I guess I shouldn't. It's a bit of a surprise to me, but it seems to be a relatively new topic, which is quite something in our world. So stay with me, stay with us, and we will and I will all will be explained in the course of the next hour. So welcome and good afternoon or good morning or good evening indeed to all of you. Um, First of all, a disclaimer. I hate disclaimers, but I'm told I have to do these things. We're trying to, in the course of today, we will offer some advice and guidance within the internal control framework, suggesting questions and answers to key areas. These are designed to help you, but they're not exhaustive, complete, and you can't just answer those and if anything ever goes wrong, saying, well, the guys at TMS didn't mention them to us. So, we're going to use common sense here. Um, if you we try and promote best practices which vary and evolve over time, which employ following manufacturers' guidelines, processes, and procedures by following the standards, be they the aviation standard setters, ICAO, FAA, EASA, and all the national regulators, CASA, Transport Canada, etc., etc. But in addition to that, we have to follow the national guidelines, of course, when it comes to electrical safety. Very important. We need to understand what competence actually means and how you measure competence and how you determine if somebody is competent to perform a task, bearing in mind the breadth and depth of tasks to be performed at airport. Areas, again, we will touch on today, including torque management. Goodness, there's a minefield to be dealt with. And sadly, but I painfully understand, manufacturers, don't like to tell you what the torque value should be for a fitting. There are standards as EB83, which is currently being revised in the US, in consultation between the IES, Airport Lighting Committee, and FAA in a very positive initiative. I would credit to Seward Ford, who's very proud to have as a member of our team here. So anyway, we're doing our best to help you guys. But ultimately, we must rely on our own skill and judgment and local practices, national, international standards when making use of any guidance offered. So the team, Tony Smith. Tony's having some technical difficulties at the moment. I think he'll be back up with us in time for the question answers session. But as you know, world-renowned inventor of the PAPI and a specialist and a developer of standards, a career spent in airfield lighting. Kevin, leader of the managing director of TMS training, training, and trainer, of course. Tony, working very closely with Kevin, 40 years in the electrical industry, a trainer with TMS training. And Seward, as I've already mentioned, independent consultant, formerly spent many years working with Kraus Heinz, and now consultant in the airfield lighting field, working on a number of projects, including the development of LEDs. And Carl, of course, who is a senior aviation consultant, specialist with Avcon, more than 50 years experience in airfield lighting, design, construction, and a great member to have on the team. So today's topic, strengthening airfield lighting with internal control questions. So what is an internal control questionnaire? This refers to using a questionnaire, self-answering questionnaire as a structured tool to systematically assess and monitor and improve the safety and compliance and operational effectiveness of airfield lighting systems. So this mysterious thing I think should be very thought-provoking and should assist you whether you're a regulator, a manager of an airfield lighting operation, or working in the airfield lighting field at an airport as an installer, or in fact even as a provider of products and services to the airfield lighting world. There's something in this for all of you. So what is an internal control questionnaire? Well, these can be developed for everything, really, all aspects of business. So in an airport, you could have them covering security, fire services, infrastructure, and everything. But specifically, we're going to give demonstration and use it in relation to airfield lighting today and show how airports and aviation authorities use them to evaluate compliance with ICAO Annex 14, FAA, EASA, and all other national regulations. These will help all of the above, including yourselves, identify any weaknesses or gaps in your processes. They will support audits and inspections with documented evidence, help prepare you for these audits and inspections. Promote and ultimately promote consistent maintenance and operational practices. And let me not forget, you cannot manage what you do not measure. This will provide evidence, an audit trail to demonstrate that you're on top of the subject matter, that you and more of measurement later, because once again you'll see the benefit of linking measurements to the actual internal control questionnaire process. So why do we use them? It's critical for safety, particularly during low visibility operations, whether that's as you know when the visual aids come into their own. But they're necessary and very important at all times to provide the guidance to the pilots. Failures and degradation, as you know, can lead to reduced visibility, misinterpretation by pilots as to where they are, what they're supposed to do, FOD risks, particularly if lights are loose or damaged, non-compliances with ICAO and FAA and national regulations, and using an internal control questionnaire will enable proactive management of these risks, i.e. avoiding them occurring in the first place. So what are the areas we might look to cover by an internal control questionnaire? Well, these are quite wide-ranging. As I said, they can cover all aspects of an airport's operations. And I recommend them to any airfield, anybody working in our field, to develop them. And you can see from the structure, we'll give an example later of what they look like, and you could develop your own. But specifically relating to visual aids, let's look at the design and layout first, so to ensure the infrastructure complies with the standards. Are the lights and positions in accordance with the standards? For maintenance and inspection, and we're going to be doing a detailed example on this, verifying the routine checks and cleaning. Are there documented preventive maintenance schedules, which are required, by the way, and are they being followed? Are the mobile tests being conducted regularly, for example, mobile photometric tests? Are faults logged and corrected within the airport procedures? So again, within ICAO and FAA, you are required to have documented processes and procedures. You are required to follow those processes and procedures and be able to demonstrate they've been followed. So you must have an audit trail, which of course lends itself to digital records much better than paper records, which we know are ineffective and cannot be used subsequently to manage the process. And of course, in the unfortunate event, as rarely happens but does happen, that something goes wrong, for example, a light coming out of your an inset fixture being dislodged in the runway, which happens surprisingly often, you need to be able to demonstrate that not only did you have the process and procedures, not only did you document that you follow those process and procedures, but also that you have the results to evidence the fact that you were going to achieve the results you're supposed to do. So you can find out how that could have happened in the first place, which of course in that latter case it shouldn't have done. Training and competency, a matter close to our hearts here. Ensuring staff are trained. So what are the maintenance staff competent and trained on lighting systems and safety procedures? How do you demonstrate they're trained and they're competent? As a whole topic in itself. So an internal control questionnaire covering this aspect of airfield lighting management. And then finally, spare parts and inventory. It still surprises me that when you identify problems with air visual aids, the often the repair, recovery, correction is hampered by the fact that the non-availability of components. It's essential that we have adequate spare lights and parts stocked. So part of our internal controls should be ensuring that those are present and they are being managed. Warranty management comes in part of that as well. So what are the benefits of using an internal control questionnaire? Well, I think if you haven't seen that already, certainly regular reviews will prevent light or visual aids related incidents, and other incidents related to the other sort of internal control questionnaire you could do. Audit readiness. Structured documentation will help during regulatory audits. So help you prepare for any audit by making sure that everything is in good shape before you come, that you have the processes and procedures, you have the roles and responsibilities clearly identified, that those processes and procedures are being followed, and that the records demonstrate compliance in all key respects. Operational continuity minimizes disruptions from lighting faults. Clearly, runway availability is absolutely critical to airports. The number of times I hear that we can't do runway, we can't do maintenance because we can't get any runway access. Well, I can tell you, you'll lose far more from disruption to airfield operations if you don't do your maintenance than if you do it in a planned and controlled way. And that by far outweighs any costs associated with performing that maintenance. As I think anybody who's experienced an unplanned event, a light coming out on the runway being identified by a pilot, for example, anybody will identify that as causing far more disruption and far more cost and pain for the airport. Improved asset management. So by having the records, particularly digitally recorded, enables better tracking of maintenance history and performance. So the disciplines followed by using an internal control questionnaire will ensure better information that can be used proactively to optimize the performance of the airport. Again, you cannot manage what you don't measure. So we're going to be looking at some specific areas here as we go through today. And we had some concerns that people might think that in some way we're being critical. So I just want to make it clear that what we try to do here is we're providing a platform of ideas for how in this case an internal control questionnaire might help and support your operations. If it's something you don't do at the moment, it's an opportunity. Look at it positively. Our intention is not to be critical here. We are trying to help. So and this experience is drawn on our very fortunate position working with airports worldwide 365 days a year. So we're able to draw on, and determine, what the best that everyone can do, that we can all benefit from. I think when it comes to safety and compliance, we're not in competition with each other. This is mandated. It's not discretionary, and this is all to help support achieving that safety and compliance. So, in terms of the internal controls, what we're going to do is we're going to identify key areas that we need to manage, and if we identify an issue, what we're planning to do about it. So these are kind of key performance indicators. So you can use technology and digital maintenance systems to identify situations that are critical to your operations automatically. So you should never have to search out or worry about finding or remembering something. If there's something critical, a critical situation arises relating to your internal controls, that should be brought to your attention systematically. You shouldn't have to go and hunt it out. We should use mobile apps for inspections and reporting. Indeed, we've just introduced a mobile app into our CMMS. So if anyone's interested, let us contact me. So computerized maintenance management system is now available on Android and iOS. Using Marm's Engineer CMS for detailed documentation of inspection and repair tasks. So you can, you only have to enter things once, no paper entry, recording things live, real time, so that you can get back into a compliant situation as quickly as possible. And then, of course, linking with the airside asset management system, CMMS, these platforms, you can use all of the information integrated together to optimize your performance. So as I promised, we're going to go into an example of an internal control questionnaire relating to airfield lighting. So in this example, we will use your knowledge of the alternative controls and procedures as the basis for answering the questions, recognizing there are other ways of doing things. For example, not everybody has a photometric testing system. So if you haven't got a photometric testing system, how do you check your lights are compliant? Well, traditionally, people used a block change as a method. Very expensive and time consuming, but I'm thinking of one airport in particular that removes every inset fixture from the runway 6 monthly and refurbishes it, and then does the photometric testing on a bench tester in the workshop before replacing it back on the runway. It's certainly a way, and it will produce a pretty good output provided you keep the lights clean. But so there are always alternatives that you can approach in situations where, in this case, you might not have the equipment. Prepare summary sheets. So in the internal control question, you have a range of questions to which group by topic, which you answer yes or no to. Any question you answer no to, you have to then identify the risk and prioritize it. 5 means it's actually happening and requires immediate action. 4 means it's a serious risk if it were to occur and you need a mitigation plan. You need to do something about it. 3 means, yes, it's a risk, it's a concern, less likely to happen, but if it does, it'll cause you a problem and you need to plan for what you would do or how to avoid it or reduce the risk, indeed. 2 is a low risk event, which needs to be kept in view and reviewed periodically. And 1 is indeed another type of risk. It's a low risk. You need to be aware of it, and you know, every time you do an annual review, just think, well, is it still very low? Is there something I can do about it? Can I make it go away? But you need to clearly prioritize, because I'm sure whatever your role or responsibilities in the airfield lighting world, you've got plenty to do. And then but if you do identify those risks, you'd have answered no. So for any question we come up against, you answer no. You have to determine, will it have a material effect, and what compensating controls and response would you utilize, would you apply should that situation occur? And describe the actions, the mitigation techniques to correct those weaknesses, and also in terms of any mitigation actions, when you're going to actually take those actions. For example, we don't do photometric testing. We see that as a risk. We're going to put a photometric system in the budget. That would be an appropriate response. So first of all, let's look at the overall in relation to airfield lighting, oversight and compliance. So these are basic questions. There may be more, there will be. I'm sure you can think of more questions, but this is an example. Is there a designated person responsible for overall airfield lighting maintenance and inspection? So, and this is a key in anything, and when you're managing a business, who is responsible for each area? You need a go-to person. This is not a committee. It's not a team. It's maybe a team effort to actually work on airfield lighting. Well, I'm sure it is. But you need to have someone who's ultimately responsible for taking the decisions, that has ownership, that will lie awake at night worrying about it, because that's their job. So have you got somebody responsible, designated person responsible for airfield lighting maintenance and inspection? The answer is yes, that's great. If it's no, then you need to think about, well, who is responsible? How does it work? Well, is there a risk there? What are you going to do about it? Are airfield lighting systems inspected in accordance with the standards, whichever standards you follow? And by the way, the standards require to be effective, the characteristics of each aid must be maintained at all times. Unfortunately, I still get told from time to time, ICAO doesn't require photometric testing. It may not require photometric testing. In some cases, it does for Cat 2, 3 runways. And I think now in ADM Part 4, it's required for Cat 1. But in terms of Cat 2, 3, it specifies minimum of 2 times per annum. But that doesn't mean you test them twice a year and you're compliant and job done. They're required to be compliant at all times, and ADM Part 4 will specify in far more detail, as will FAA Advisory Circular 26C, 5340-26C, and other TP 312 CASA regulations. They all specify the requirements, but ultimately those lights have to be compliant. And if anything ever happened on your airfield, you need to be able to demonstrate that you routinely maintain and manage compliance in accordance with the standards for your airport. Otherwise, your airport and you potentially will have a huge problem. Is there an up-to-date documented preventive maintenance program in place? As I said, the standards require you have processes and procedures, a maintenance program, but also per the last point here, are the maintenance records maintained and reviewed regularly? You need to be able to have the maintenance records there to show that it's being done, and of course that the lights are maintained in a compliant state. And then the final point is, are staff adequately trained and competent to perform lighting maintenance and testing? Now, increasingly, we're seeing more regulation coming into that. Standards are being developed, but in terms of ICAO, you have to be a competent person, and you need to be able to demonstrate refresher training every 3 years, and AR, so that's every 2 years. We'll do a separate webinar on training requirements from this webinar. Lighting and serviceability. So are pre-operational lighting checks documented? Yes or no? If they're not, I think I don't know. I think every airport I've ever been to has always had them, but they've got to be documented and they've got to be followed. Are all runway taxiway and apron lights functioning per the intensity beam angle requirements? Yes or no? But if the answer is yes, you've got to be able to substantiate that claim with photometric testing reports, for example. Are mobile photometric systems used at appropriate intervals? Now, some airports may have a service every now and again. Some people may have their own equipment. Many airports don't have any equipment at all. But in those cases, doesn't mean you can't, you still have to maintain compliant lighting. So you need to have systems and processes in place to ensure those lights are tested and compliant. You may do beam alignment. You may do there are different methods. As the example I gave earlier, where every light is pulled in after 6 months and rechecked and reworked and then checked again on the bench tester. It's an extreme method, but it can work. But you must have compliant lighting at all times, because you never know when you get those low visibility conditions. Key part of asset management are degradation trends tracked over time. So whichever, whether it's a approach light, a taxiway light, runway light, apron lighting, PAPIs or signs, measuring again, you can't manage what you don't measure. Measuring the light output and the beam orientation where appropriate will give you you'll be able to see the degradation trends, and you'll be able to optimize your maintenance practices, your maintenance frequency, and exactly what you do on those preventive maintenance actions. Is lighting performance integrated to runway visual range? Now that's quite a question, because I rarely find any airport knows the relationship of runway visual range to the airfield lighting. The runway visual range is calculated by and large. Most airports use instrumented runway visual range calculation now, and inherent in the formula for that is an assumed intensity of your runway lighting. But what is the assumed intensity in your IR/VR system? Find out and check that you're actually achieving that, because if you're not achieving it, the runway visual range that's given on every takeoff and landing to the pilot will be overstated, which clearly is a safety risk. So be very aware of that. If you want more information, we have a short paper on that topic, and I think it's well, I'll check afterwards. But Damon, if you're online at the moment, please just check that we have our IR/VR paper currently available on our website, and it's freely available to anyone to have a look at. Fault reporting and resolution. So do you have formal procedures for reporting any lighting faults, that be they visual inspections or be they from more formal inspection, including photometric testing? Are the lighting faults logged with time of report, what they are, and what the time of the resolution was? Is there a service level agreement for response times relating to critical lighting failures? And is it being achieved? Particularly critical are, of course, adjacent light failures, which would all immediately render a lighting service to be non-compliant. And is corrective action taken, documented, and verified? So have you got an audit trail to verify that the appropriate response has been taken, the service level is being met? Again, you can't manage what you don't measure. In relation to inspection and maintenance, are the light fittings inspected for alignment, cleanliness, and fastener torque at regular intervals? Clearly, the for inset fixtures, that you can always use that as an opportunity to look at the mechanical mechanical integrity of the fixture, as well as the cleanliness and alignment. Generally is for inset fixtures is determined at the point of installation, but for elevated edge fittings, it's required, something that needs to be done regularly because of the pressures of takeoff and landing traffic, and snow removal, of course. Mechanical damage to fixtures, from aircraft or vehicles, is that being recorded and addressed? I recently came across some pappies that were seriously misaligned because of the jet blast from taking off aircraft. With the big overhanging wings on some of the larger planes nowadays, they put enormous pressure on the pappies. Are proper torque wrenches, calibrated torque wrenches, being used during, not just as a check, but during installation and servicing? We came across one airport which was using it for checking the lights, but they were missed off during when they weren't using the equipment for testing, for installation. So the bolts were not put on, and the light came out of the runway. It happened in between regular checks. So you need to use this equipment at all times to give you a comprehensive audit trail to demonstrate that the fixtures are being are being torqued at the correct intervals and managed safely. And is there a method in place to track inspection history and compliance? And again, a CMMS, computerized maintenance management system, such as Marm's Engineer, would be invaluable to help manage that process. When you've got sometimes, some larger airfields have 20, 30, 40, almost 50,000 light fixtures across the whole airfield. You can imagine the number of bolts that are involved in such installations, and all the rest of the visual aids at an airport. Managing these things cannot be done with paper-based systems. You need to have computerized maintenance management systems, and not just to make sure everything's done, but also to track the inspection history and compliance, to demonstrate, to provide an audit trail to show that the process has been followed, and critically, that it works. Electrical safety. Now this is vitally important. I've just come from an IEC meeting in Helsinki, and we're focused on the standards relating to the electrical safety, very relevant to the people that are working on the lights and constant current circuits at airports. And it's vital that those people have been trained and can demonstrate how to create an electrically safe work condition. Safe isolation is absolutely critical here. Training is necessary. There are a lot of electricians come to work on airfields, but the airfield environment is quite unique and requires specialist training, and those people to be able to demonstrate their competence through practical exercises. This is not a classroom training. We need to have an active documented electrical safety plan in place. That's in accordance with the aviation standards, international electrical standards, and of course the national standards. Is the safety plan audited on the required schedule? And do you have qualified personnel that with demonstrated proficiency to be able to do that? Are staff adequately trained and certified to perform CPR? We had a long debate about how, the relevance of this, but we need to have people on site at all times with basic medical capabilities. And you never know when situations are going to occur, and on an isolated airfield environment, it's very important that there is some people available to support any of their colleagues in whatever the cause of the issue might be. So again, it follows that we can trained on how to contact emergency personnel, part of the induction process. Is there are there two-person work rules in place? Clearly lone workers at night on the scale of somewhere like an airport is a risk and needs to be managed. And it's not simply a matter of cost, although I can see people saying, well, it's too expensive. There's certain things, if we have processes and procedures, we must follow them. Compliance is not discretionary, it's mandatory. Do personnel have the necessary and properly fitted PPE? Again, we need to set a good example here. We need to have the rules. By and large, we have the rules. I would say the issue is they're not often not followed. So we need to be very cognizant of this, and management needs to set a good example in relation to that in particular, because everybody must have and when working on an airfield, have the properly fitted PPE. And of course, the whole health and safety, electrical safety needs to be documented as well as followed and trained. Now we looking next at FOD. I think most airports will have procedures in place to prevent airfield lights becoming FOD. The key one, of course, being the inspection and maintenance regime. Lights do become FOD, bolts do become FOD. For various reasons, we need to have an inspection maintenance regime, and we need to be managing those situations, managing to avoid them. But working on airfields, we're using a lot of tools, parts, and cleaning materials, and those need to be managed also. We can't be leaving things on runways or having things being blown away, as I've seen in the past. So being accountable for all of the tools and equipment we're using is critical. And after we leave the airfield, we need to have checklists to make sure that everything, and there are some systems available for this, to make sure everything we took onto the runway is actually taken off the runway. Again, in my experience, the major issue is untidy vehicles. I sometimes go onto airports where trucks, they're workstations, but they can become rather cluttered with stuff which can easily fall out. So this is this is not something you would have on a list, but we need to avoid having materials that could inadvertently be left on a runway or taxiway when we're doing our work. And then finally, cleaning and environmental considerations. Environment is something we all need to be very cognizant. We've seen the increasing awareness over the last few years. So when it comes to cleaning lights, we want to use non-damaging methods. We don't want to use wire brushes, screwdriver, razor blades, or high pressure water that could get inside the fixture. Something, we advocate the Mars cleaner, of course, but that uses an inert substance, bicarbonate of soda, that's highly effective. Hardly uses a very, very small amount and will quickly and cleanly clean a runway light, even if it's black with rubber. Cleaning frequency, of course, people say, how often should we do it? Well, it depends on the photometric degradation data. So as the contamination builds up on the lens, based on experience, you can figure out how often you need to clean them. We've done some studies with airports. You can see clearly seasonality factors involved in this. So I've seen in winter at a major international airport in the UK, recommending evidence-based on a cleaning regime every 8 days. However, a de-icing event will require immediate cleaning because of the impact the fluid has on the light, especially bearing in mind that with LED lights, that it just sits there and you get this de-icing fluid drying onto the front of the lens, which severely impacts on the photometric output. So use the photometric degradation data to help manage that. And then finally, are the chemicals, if used, environmentally safe and improved? Clearly, you don't want damaging chemicals washed into rivers and streams. Right, and then the documentation and audit, as I said to you before, processes and procedures must be documented, and the maintenance inspection activities also documented with date, time, personnel, and results. So you've got a complete audit trail of the work being done. Those should be audited at least annually for having a view to ensuring compliance. And discrepancies or non-compliance findings need to be followed up with corrective action plans. These are the questions in terms of you would expect to find an internal control audit questionnaire. But look at it, depending on your roles and responsibilities, look at it as a self-assessment at this time. It's very much we're all responsible in some way, shape, or form for the compliance of airfields. And this tool, this proactive approach, self-assessment, self-evaluation, which could turn into a formal audit questionnaire, can be very, very useful in whatever our roles or responsibilities might be. Finally, we're looking at systems redundancy and upgrades. Everything has an end of life. So first of all, are the lighting control systems tested redundancy and failover capability? I've had questions over measurement of this, and we're currently conducting a project to measure the light intensity across a transfer from the CCR to a generator. So we're actually engaged in a testing at the moment of lights from different services to measure how quickly we can maintain the time between falling below 50% and getting back to 50% for a Cat 2.3 or a Cat 1 switch on for a generator. So we can measure this on the runway. So that's going to be a very interesting topic, and maybe the subject again of a TMS Tuesday, because it is a highly specialized area which is dealt with in a number of different ways around airports. But that's something that needs to be tested, because it's no good if your lights go out, the generator doesn't start. Are there plans in place to upgrade or replace aging lighting systems? or any aging or any safety critical equipment for that matter. So you need to do a review of the equipment you've got, and according to the criticality of that equipment and the age and the reliability, determine when replacement or addressing the maintenance regime is required. And then finally, are lighting upgrades evaluated for compatibility with existing monitoring systems. Increasingly, with new technologies today, we need to ensure integration ensure the integration integrity with between control systems for new lights, CCRs for all different sorts of LED equipment in particular, but also between different makes, models, and manufacturers to avoid surprises. You do not want to be left stuck in the middle. If you're an airport, and as I'm saying, speak to manufacturers here, an airport does not want to be found in the middle of a situation where your system you provided is working fine. The system it connected to is working fine. It's just that they don't work together, and it suddenly becomes the airport's problem. So that's something that needs to be addressed before starting a project, not for the first time when you've switched it on. So, in conclusion, using internal control questionnaire, I think will help ensure that safety critical systems are consistently monitored, maintained, and aligned with international aviation standards. And when properly designed and implemented, they'll help any airport operator minimize risk, meet compliance requirements, and improve overall runway and taxiway operations. That's what we're all trying to achieve here. So with that, I would like to open the floor up to questions to our expert panel. Before I do, just mention again a plug for next month, 24th of June, we'll be coming some case studies to see how some major airports actually do this stuff. So that'd be very interesting. 24th of June will be our first one, but we want to run a series of these throughout the summer. And so with that, let's hand back to the panel. Tony, Carl, Seward, Tony, and Kev. If I can just exit this presentation, hopefully I'll have some questions from you. Just a moment, please. Right. Okay, guys. So, do we get Tony's back? I think Tony has a problem with the Tony's got a problem with the his screen, his video. But can you hear us, Tony?
Oh, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I've got audio. I haven't
Yeah,
got video, but that doesn't
right.
matter.
Okay. So, right then.
Can I make one or two comments? Because I thought that was a very interesting presentation. I'm glad I was able to hear it. Two or three observations. One is this whole process is very familiar to other parts of the aviation industry in many ways. I mean, for example, making sure you haven't left tools out on the runway. In maintenance of aircraft, it's quite standard to have a place for every tool sort of marked on the wall, so a quick visual check, you can see if anything's missing. You put your tools back when you've finished. And, that's one way of doing it, to ensure, every spanner has got a place on a wall somewhere with it, so you know whether it's there or not. As far as reporting is concerned, obviously the focus we're doing today has been on testing with equipment and so on. But is there anywhere in this process an opportunity for other people, particularly the end user, to make a report that they think there's something wrong, into the maintenance schedule, if you like. Can they contact the maintenance crew and say there's something wrong with the approach lights or something, perhaps an unusual occurrence, but it needs to be reported, and the end user usually has a means of making a complaint, if you like. Whether that should be included in it. And the third thing is the budget for all of this. That's one of the weaknesses, I think, in getting the maintenance done, that there doesn't so often seem to be a published budget. And in fact, if you go to your senior management and ask for money for maintenance, they haven't got any budget for it. Should in your annual review, shouldn't you also publish your budgetary figures for it?
Yes, that would be an interesting one. Yeah, all good points. I've certainly come across, I think the old, some of the old ways are always the best ways. Making sure that all of your equipment is visibly presented, so you know if it's there. If you've got a rack of spanners and there's a one missing on the wall, or a hammer missing or something, then you will know. Um, it's that's certainly one way, and nowadays there's also, Tony, one of our UK airports recommended to me. There's someone's come up with an app for tracking tools. You using RFID. You can put a tag on. You can actually tag the tools,
Yeah.
so you can find them. Um, and I don't know if these, like these iPhone, if you can tag your luggage, can't you? So you could presumably tag everything, but there's certainly some great technologies out there. Um, but I think one of the key things, as I was saying earlier, was not having not having not taking more than is necessary, and and having cluttered up vehicles, because it's very easy for things to fall out, as has happened. Um, the I've got a question here from Peter Kesterton, who's saying, how often do inset light fittings come out of their fittings? He mentions to the JAL incident, which I think was the early noughties. Could you share some other examples, please? Um, um, I have to say that airports are not very keen to be public on these embarrassing incidents. Um, they do happen, Peter. Um, rather more. Well, I don't know if I just get to hear all of them, but rather more frequently than I would like. But people obviously trying to avoid them becoming public. Um, but I know of a few events which have actually caused damage to aircraft, and and I'm sure I only know very few of the ones that actually happen. So this is this is a major risk, um, because we're talking about typically the actual light fitting itself. Bolts, I've heard less incidents about bolts getting stuck in aircraft, although there was once an aircraft identified as having, when the engine blew up, they found a lump of brass in there, that airport used brass screws, I think, to fit the lights. So it was, I'm sure it does happen, and heavens knows if anything has actually been involved in a fatal accident. As to whether that would have been identified or not, I don't know. But
We uh, we have, Robert, we have a statement, a record of that happening at JFK Airport on a flight. I can get you a copy of the report on that. As you say, airports aren't too excited about reporting their problems of that nature. But I do have one. That was a JFK flight that was heading to Japan also. And a fixture came out, embedded the aircraft, and made the flight to Japan, and it did some damage. So I can get you a copy of that, or to the person who was interested in reading it. It took a lot of time to find that information, but it is available. And I just want to comment on the presentation. I thought that was excellent today, and I thought yeah, that's the basis. Now we may want to edit places here and there depending on where we're from, but that's a good basis for us to edit and hold dear, so to speak, as a starting document as the things that we should be concerned about for these situations. And I think we ought to promote it, in our case, to the FAA, in your other cases to ICAO and so forth, that this is a standard. This is the Bible lesson with regard to what you ought to be doing as maintenance on your airport. And we can change it, as I say, over time, but we ought to start publishing it, if everybody agrees with that, publishing it and say, this is our recommendation. And when it comes to the FAA, you said it's going to be a year or two, or it could be forever before they require photometric testing. But let's start promoting a document that does require it to people, and that way may be a very good way to implicate the work done by the agencies. In other words, if we can show the document already exists and we present it to people, why don't we adopt it and make it uniform? That's my suggestion.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, ultimately, thank you for that, Sue. Ultimately, we have standards that do require testing, that do require inspection, that do require safety. And this process helps to identify any non-conformances and if they're and identify whether they're serious or not. I mean, I guess they're all serious if they're non-conformances, but the risk associated with that identified non-conformance and what the airport is doing about it.
Well, here I can tell you that here in the States, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, there is no requirement to do photometric testing on your fixtures. In fact, at times when a certain inspector in the past have come to look at your airport, they will say, turn the lights on. Oh, they work. Okay. And there's a recommendation that it be done, but there's no requirement and no follow-up to ensure it being done.
Well, I think if it's Part 139 funded project, there is a requirement per 26C, because if it's Part 139 funded, then they have to perform the maintenance in accordance with the advisory circular 26C, and that does specify photometric testing.
It recommends photometric testing. It does not require it in 26. It's an interesting choice of words.
Right. Good. Well, yeah. Yes. So thank you for that, Stuart. In terms of trade, go on, Tony.
I'll just say something. That was very much to the point, I think, what Stuart was saying. You know, you can recommend things that not implemented. But I think one thing, I'll just ride my old hobby horse again. A flight test will not do the job. The whole of this started in the UK with your company when I pointed out to CAA they'd just done a flight inspection and passed an international airport lighting as compliant, and it was producing anything between 10 and 20% of the required light output on the centre line. But the flight inspection had said it was perfect, there's nothing wrong. You cannot do this with flight testing or a quick visual inspection. You've got to measure.
Thank you. And Tony and Kev, if something, I understand this, it's only recommended, but if you were to have an incident at an airfield and you were to say, well, we don't do photometric testing because it's only a recommendation, how do you think that would look?
Yeah.
I mean,
Well,
we're all very,
I think, go ahead.
I
ahead,
said
Tony.
we're all very, we will be very careful legally about disclaimers and not taking and no one wants to take responsibility or anything. But ultimately, if an airfield lighting is found to be non-compliant, regardless of whether you follow the recommendation or don't follow the recommendation,
Yeah.
the airfield lighting is non-compliant. Who is responsible? The airport.
Yeah. Well, I can recall being asked to go and look at it's a military installation where, in fact, it was an airport close to the sea, and there was a case of sea fog rolling in to reduce visibility for landing. That was in process, and the squadron commander did an approach and landed on the runway edge lights. And of course, he was a very senior pilot, and the Court of Inquiry was doing all it could to exonerate him from, if you like, pilot error. They pointed at the lighting, and I went and had a look at it and said, there's nothing wrong with the lighting. You have to face the fact this guy screwed up, got it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
in the process of investigation, you have to remember there are sometimes all sorts of pressures in there to produce a report that isn't actually strictly accurate. In fact, might be quite off because someone's back is being protected.
Yeah. Well, and so yeah, I mean there are also yes. So there ultimately when we talk about cost and resources, I mean resources can be monetary resources for equipment, it can be monetary resources for staff or training those staff. But ultimately, I would argue that the you should bear in mind the cost of disruption of the airport if and when something goes wrong, and we know it does go wrong from time to time, and the cost of losing your runway availability, bearing in mind most airports are single runway, is massively outweighs any cost of doing timely and effective maintenance.
Yeah.
Now we've got a lot of questions coming in here. We'll try and do those. We'll quickly run through here. What is the best way to track our maintenance team are following up on the checklist? So, how can we manage how can we track that the maintenance team are actually following the PMs that are listed? Training guys, Tony or Kev?
My thoughts on this are, realistically, it comes down to the procedures that are laid down within the individual airports. They all have their PPMs that are produced. The majority will have a completion requirement to be filled in on the documentation, be it on computer or be it on paper. It comes down to the supervisory level then ensuring that they are done within the prescribed timescale. It's one of those things that, as you said at the beginning, somebody has to have the responsibility, and that's what it all comes down to. Yes, the technicians have the responsibility of maintaining, but somebody has the responsibility of ensuring that the technicians are doing their job correctly.
Yeah, and ultimately, I would argue a computerized maintenance management system would be the most effective way of doing doing that. A, to ensure the tasks are performed, and B, to provide the audit trail to be able to demonstrate that those processes are being followed consistently.
Weekly staff meetings.
Weekly staff meetings. What you mean talking to people? Don't, Seward, you have to realize that people don't talk to each other anymore.
That's a problem.
I think yes, I think team meetings, handovers, but I think you need to have digital technologies as well to support that, because to provide the evidence, because paper-based systems the paper-based systems can work, but you don't have you're not able to use them as part of the management process to be able to, and AI, as we see, to be able to optimize maintenance practices going forward.
Could I just observe there that if you think for a moment of operating a passenger aircraft, the pre-flight checks is very similar to what you're talking about. There's a pre-flight checklist, and the procedure is either the pilot or the co-pilot reads that checklist out one at a time, and the other person is responsible for responding and say, that's been checked, it's right. You go through the whole lot. At the end, then the person that reading it out says, checklist complete. There's actually an audio
yes.
record of the fact that it's been gone through.
Yes, yeah, I agree. It's again, it's good communication and checks and balances to make sure things are actually done as intended, like the system for airfield communications, where you are required to repeat to confirm your understanding of an instruction, and that's recorded as well. Very useful.
Yeah.
Right, there's a number of very specific questions here. Which I think we should take offline, because otherwise we're going to run out of time. If we look at there was a point here about RVRs linked on all lighting ALCMS for Cat 123 linked to the airport ASM CGS MEGs. The point is about the runway visual range is that yes, you can link it to the control systems, but the problem is, of course, the control system can't read the photometric output. My point is that linking the photometric output with the dirt and contamination is the main issue we find with airfield lighting non-compliance, is and alignment, of course, for edge lights. Those things are picked up from photometrics. But when I go to an airfield, it's rare that it's very difficult to find out what the value is for the intensity in the IR/VR system. So I think there's and I suggest whoever that asked that question should try and find it out for their airport. Right, I'm looking through here. One for you, Seward, a tricky one, but I'm sure if you don't know, can you find out? I have a question, please. We're using a shallow base. Shall it be 60 centimeters away from the pavement joint? I understand FAA has a requirement when it comes to deep bases, but is it applicable to shallow ones? So when you've got pavement joints, I mean, it's logical you would have a minimum distance for inserting a can. Do you know what those regs are in the FAA?
No, I'd have to look it up.
Right, we'll
To be
look
sure.
that one up.
Yeah.
As I said, there are a number of very specific questions here, and we will get back to you with those answers. But I think I hope I hope today's webinar has provoked a lot of thoughts for you guys, and as I think Sue had suggested, something or Tony, something we can take forward in our industry to help promote safety and efficiency by asking us, whatever our roles and responsibilities are, asking us these deep and these well, deep, I said, basic questions, and exploring the risks associated with any no answers to them. And if we employ that in our airfield, it will help us. It'll help promote safety, compliance, and of course efficiency, and also standardization, because that's also a very critical thing. The airport, the pilots, when they use our airfields, expect to see a consistent view of the visual aids, their performance, their location, their operation. But people working at airfields also should expect the same thing. And we want uniformity when it comes to safety for people working at airports as well as the pilots using airports.
Publish the list. Publish the list as presented and send it to all of us so we can work with it.
Okay, I will do that. And we can also share it with our participants here, because I'm always keen to involve you guys in the process. We're all trying to achieve the same thing at the end of the day. I thank you very much to everyone that's joined us for the webinar today, for your time, for your interest. Of course, huge thanks to the panel, without which we wouldn't be able to do this, your knowledge and expertise. And now I look forward to joining you in a summer series of case studies where we go through some of the world's major airports, and we'll be talking to them about how they do it, what works, perhaps even what doesn't work, how we can do things better, and so we can all learn from each other and have optimize the best practices for our airfield lighting and visual aids generally. So thank you very much. Have a great month, and I'll see you on the 24th of June, and we'll publish details of our first airport very soon. Thank you very much, guys. Thank you, Damon. Thank you, Felicity. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.